Shannon asked me to give this talk, I think, on the fly, just due to some changing slates of schedules, and I was happy to do it. I think it's a really interesting time to be doing it right now. I guess first and foremost, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Andrew Burchwell. I'm the executive director of the Ohio Blockchain Council, which we set up as an advocacy organization to ensure that Ohio is an important and special place to be building Bitcoin and Bitcoin technologies. And I think, aside from anything that I do, very, very exciting that we have any company, but especially a company like River Financial, or just River now, excuse me, headquartered in Columbus and staffed with a really tremendous group of people. So give a round of applause to the team at River for putting this on. Thank you for giving us this view for free. I really appreciate it. More than anything, actually, I think I just want to say I'm very grateful that anybody here in this room is interested at all in anything I have to say, because I think sometimes I just am thinking to myself about all these topics and why they're interesting and why they're important. But, as part of the process of talking about why we're doing what we're doing, and especially as it relates to politics, I think it's really important that we recognize, those of us in this room, that politics really is nothing except for the people that participate in it. And so, as much as we're always looking for others outside of ourselves to really find a solution or carve out a piece of legislation or, not get in the way of something that we think is interesting, at the end of the day, it's actually the people in this room who are showing up and advocating that really make the difference. So just want to encourage everybody to continue to do what you are doing, to really be a proponent for something you believe in, because if we're not the adopters of Bitcoin, then Bitcoin is nothing and we aren't able to accomplish what we're able to accomplish. As it relates to the actual inner workings of, let's say, the political process, raise your hand if 4 years ago at the last halving you thought Bitcoin was going to be a national political issue in 2024 here today. Maybe, yeah, maybe, right? It's kind of an interesting moment, and I think it's really important for us to recognize the moment that we're actually in, which is that we're now talking about Bitcoin at the highest levels of governance and at the highest levels of electoral politics. And so it's no longer just the people in this room saying, this is super interesting, let me tell my friends and family about it. It's now a considerable position and pivot for political parties to really recognize the opportunity to take on a technology, be innovative, and be at the forefront of an idea. So I'll talk a little bit today about what we're seeing at the national scale, what we're seeing at the state scale, and maybe what we can be doing here at the local level to be more effective. Obviously, I think the biggest thing that's relevant right now is we've seen a major political candidate running for president talking affirmatively about the benefits of Bitcoin, and I think maybe most importantly to people in this room, differentiating Bitcoin from everything else, which I think in and of itself is an interesting signal. It's very clear that there are people behind the scenes who are doing a lot of really great work to make that happen. But it's not just Donald Trump talking about it at this point. We've seen other major political candidates like Robert Kennedy Jr. taking this on in earnest as a political platform. We're seeing this in Senate races now. We're seeing this directly in the state of Ohio with Bernie Moreno going very directly against Sherrod Brown, who is somebody who is maybe one of the most antagonistic people towards our industry that exists in federal politics. And so to have all of this sort of in concert right now really speaks to, I think, how important this year will be and how important this moment is for those of us who are advocates and educating ourselves on the topic to continue the work. If price is high and people are talking about it on television, you're no longer the weird person at the Thanksgiving dinner table or whatever it might be, right? We're not alone. We're actually doing this in concert with very serious efforts. So I think it's important to keep doing that and really take advantage of the momentum. And that's some of the work that we're doing at the Ohio Blockchain Council, is to recognize that this is an ongoing process. It is not going to happen overnight, and we need to be showing up and continually having the conversations with political stakeholders, with people that are close to us in our circles, with bringing attention to it however we can through media, through technology, through businesses, et cetera. And maybe just taking a moment here too to recognize the hard work that folks like Shannon do to bring everybody together here today. So please give Shannon a round of applause too, because it's no small feat what you've done. It's very impressive, and we're very excited that Columbus is being recognized as a place where these technologies and this idea is coming to the forefront. And if we take a picture of this, which hopefully we do from the back so nobody's faces are showing, it's great to just put it on social media and let all of the other cities around the country know that Columbus has weight, and we really are actually the heart of it. And I think that's really important right now. So aside from national electoral politics, right, so we have an election campaign season that's underway right now, and we're recognizing that Bitcoin is going to be at the center of, maybe a debate even. We'll see on Thursday what happens. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Bitcoin question or a cryptocurrency question, maybe generally, because I'm not expecting the folks at CNN to really recognize the difference at this point. But at that point, it becomes something that my grandma pays attention to, that people who are not really interested in this topic are paying attention to. And so then it's kind of the, well, so what? And I've seen a lot of discussion on Twitter or X, and other things about, well, it doesn't really matter if a politician is saying this because we can't trust them, or they're just going to go back on their word, or they're just doing this for votes, et cetera. I tend to take a different stance, which is that attention is actually the economy that's most important right now. And I think no matter what, the fact that we're talking about it is the important signal right now. And we have to take that and move it towards the next step, which is how do we actually instantiate this into legitimate aspects of our modern and broader economy. And so one thing that we're working on at the Ohio Blockchain Council is to get state pension funds to recognize that this is an investment opportunity for what is, like, you may not know it, but a very, very messy process of state pensions and investments, at least within the state of Ohio. And so we've seen other states like Wisconsin actually already take the institutional ETF products that have been institutionalized by folks like BlackRock and Fidelity and otherwise. And they've actually invested to date 1% of 1% of their investment portfolio into Bitcoin, which is incredible. That's almost $180 million worth of Bitcoin that's sitting on a public balance sheet that is used as an investment and a savings vehicle for people in the state of Wisconsin. So we're trying to do that here in the state of Ohio. I think that we have a bit of a ways to go there, but hopefully I'm not just doing that by myself, and hopefully we have other people that are willing to sort of stand in front of that and really talk about its benefit. Other things that we're really trying to affect right now are instantiating affirmative rights within the Ohio Revised Code. So there is a piece of legislation right now in the state of Ohio that was introduced by Representative Steve Demetrio, and it's colloquially known as the Blockchain Basics Bill. But what it does is basically put into law, if it passes, and if it passes is a whole other story, because if you don't know, the politic in the state of Ohio is very messy right now. It basically says that you have the right to self-custody your digital assets, generally speaking, and that's huge. And I try to remind people too that self-custody is actually far more important than just Bitcoin, because self-custody is an inherent principle and right of free and sovereign people, and that language in and of itself should be as general as possible. Other things that it tries to accomplish is preventing local jurisdictions from imposing onerous tax penalties on Bitcoin mining facilities, for instance. So another example of how we can ensure that we're competitive in an open marketplace of free enterprise. And it has other mechanisms in there to basically ensure that the technologies that are inherent in Bitcoin are accessible to people in the state of Ohio and can't be usurped or taken by any, let's say, well-intentioned politician that thinks they know best for us. As it relates to, the Bitcoin mining and energy utility side of things, part of the reason why we started the Ohio Blockchain Council was to be a stalwart and a strong advocate for the development of Bitcoin mining data centers within the state of Ohio. And right now we're actually facing a fairly large-scale public battle with the public utilities in Ohio, because essentially they're saying, well, Bitcoin mining and data centers in general are growing too quickly. We can't keep up with it. And so we're going to halt that. We're going to put the kibosh on that. We're going to make it so contractually onerous that it will make it nearly impossible for Bitcoin mining to be built in the state of Ohio. And so that's something we're trying to prevent, because we think Ohio is a very unique territory for Bitcoin mining, and we are seeing the growth of Bitcoin mining in ways that, maybe don't rival Texas, but, I'll sort of chirp at the side at them anytime I see them, because we have a tremendous opportunity here in Ohio to be at the forefront of the Bitcoin mining industry, not just nationally, but globally if we do things correctly. And unfortunately, what these tariff filings and other things are trying to do is really try to stifle that because of other impedances within the broader energy system. So again, all of these things are interesting things to talk about, but it really does take showing up and participating and providing the subject matter expertise that can affect the process, that changes the process and allows us to take Bitcoin forward. So I would encourage all of you to educate yourselves on the topic, and certainly can answer whatever I can answer about that topic. But that is real, that's ongoing. We just submitted comments in that process today, and we're trying to get that done. Federally, I think that we've seen a couple of very interesting moves from a legislative perspective, and this would be more broadly within the blockchain and cryptocurrency sphere, but I do think it's relative to Bitcoin and very important to talk about. We actually had a landmark piece of legislation passed called Fit 21, Financial Infrastructure Technology for the 21st Century, passed the House of Representatives by a vote of, I think, 279 to 130 something. And basically what that means is that actually, in a bipartisan manner, we have people that are willing to say affirmatively that we want these technologies to exist and exist within an understandable environment within the United States. And I have my own, let's say, perspectives on that bill and whether or not it's a good bill or a bad bill. And maybe it's imperfect, but at the end of the day, it's a signal that that was passed. And I think that signal creates political pressure that then makes it very difficult for people to come out against our industry. And if they do, guess what? We get to show up and we get to vote and we get to make sure that they don't win re-election or they don't have a seat within a committee that's important and things like that. Another piece of legislation, well, actually, it was a regulatory rule that was imposed, was repealed by the House and the Senate, SAB 121, and then that was vetoed by the Biden administration. And they basically said they were going to do that, and they did. But what it does now is it really created a lot of political pressure from the left and from the right to basically take a stance on this issue. And I think that's, again, circling back to the moment we're in, it's no longer that you can ignore this. You now have to take a stance, and you get to choose. Everything in life that is meaningful, we buy into, we opt into one way or another. And when we make a choice, then we have to live with that choice. And now we're basically seeing a pure differentiation between the existing administration and people who want to take over, let's say, executive leadership moving forward. And there's a market differentiation. And for better or worse, President Trump coming out and saying that he's for Bitcoin mining. He wants Bitcoin to be made in America, which I think is a really funny saying. But listen, it works. Like, think of the narrative that's under play here. Basically, the Biden administration is now sort of slowly walking back some of their positions because they recognize this is actually a losing issue. Polling shows that something like 20% of people in the state of Ohio alone own or have owned at one point some type of digital asset. And it's not specific to Bitcoin. It's very hard to get those statistics. I'm sure the folks at River have a good sample on that. But at the end of the day, that's a very significant portion of the voting base, and now it can't be ignored. And so, again, it's incredible when you really stop and think about the moment we're in, because I think 2-3 years ago, this would have been unheard of. We wouldn't have been able to predict this. And I think it's a really, really important signal that now is actually the right time for us to be in this room and to be talking about these things. And just very grateful, again, that Shannon invited me to come up here and talk about it a little bit. I think that, we have a lot more to do. We're working very heavily to ensure that the right candidates get into office, people who take on a position of meaningful affirmativeness in this industry. And I think that we're going to continue to do that, but we have a long way to go, because at the end of the day, this is still fairly niche, but I think this year will change that. And I would encourage all of you to reach out to people who are involved in the process. Come talk to me about how you can be involved. Just get involved, because I think, again, politics is nothing more than the effect of the will of the people as much as we can affect it. And maybe it's gotten out of our hands a little bit, but that's why we Bitcoin. So I think that that's a good signal. I think that that's very useful in terms of giving us hope for what's to come. And I am very hopeful, by the way, that I do think that we are going to win. So thank you all for being here and for listening to me. I know that, we have a few other people to get through, but I'd be happy to take a few questions, I guess, if you guys have any at this time.
Frequent ones, you can answer all of them. One, are there any immediate action steps that you would tell us for supporting the work of the Ohio Blockchain Council?
Yeah, well, you're here listening. I think that's the most immediate. I think if you want to become an individual member of the Ohio Blockchain Council, that's something we would certainly welcome the support of. Obviously, we're a membership organization that is to the benefit of our members, and we would love to see more individuals participating. And we can talk about what that means, but would be happy to have you as a member.
Second question, do you Dennis Porter has been out with Satoshi Action Fund.
He sure has.
State legislatures and things like that. Mm-hmm. Do you have any intersection with that?
Oh, very much. Yeah, Dennis is a friend, and we work very closely with them. They were very instrumental in getting the blockchain basics legislation introduced. And so we're working in tandem with them to ensure that state legislature members and people who are either on staff or just adjacent to it understand what the bill means, understand why it's important to pass, and hopefully get that through. The sticky point is that the Ohio state government is currently fighting amongst itself. There's like a little bit of infighting amongst leadership, and so that's pretty much stifled most progress of anything within the state. And so if that doesn't happen this year, we will expect it to happen next year, and we'll be working very closely with Dennis and his group on that.
Very quick thing, you know, you said there's resistance, there's some pretty active resistance to Bitcoin mining from the utility
Yes.
side, right? Is some of that related to, like I understand in Columbus, there's some major data centers in the works that they say are like quadruple or more what the existing demand is.
Yes.
Is it like, how are we going to do that and Bitcoin mining? What's the...
Yeah, a little bit of nuance here, but happy to get into it quickly. So basically, Central Ohio is very congested from an energy and power perspective, and that's absolutely true. We're seeing a tremendous amount of data center growth, and that's the traditional data centers, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Bitcoin miners don't tend to build in the same places that those people do, and there are reasons for that, right? And it just has to do with the nature of how it consumes energy and the low-cost energy it needs to consume. But because of the general constraint within Central Ohio, AEP is trying to impose new tariff and rate structures on all of Ohio and for big data centers and for cryptocurrency mining specifically. Even though we're not necessarily part of the congestion, we're sort of lumped in with that. And as such, we're having to carve out arguments about why they're not necessarily the same, why we're not necessarily a big part of the problem. But to the point of your question, we were expecting load growth in the power grid to double over the next 6 years, essentially. And so AEP and everybody else, and Texas is going through this as well, they said it took us 100 years to build the system that we've built today. And you're expecting us to double it in 6. And that is a huge problem. And so we face a really, as I say, a generation crisis, which is that we can't build power generation quickly enough to meet the demand. And we have to figure out how to do that. We think Bitcoin mining can be a complement to that process, but it's telling that story effectively.
Do you by any chance know what's causing that doubling of energy consumption?
It's all the ChatGPT queries that you're putting in there, man. Yeah, you got to quit that. Yeah. No, it is data center growth specifically, and it's the hyperscalers especially, and Bitcoin mining is part of that. And in Texas, we're seeing that I think it's like an estimated 55% of new load growth over the next 5 years is specific to Bitcoin mining, right? So Texas did such a great job of saying, we're the home of Bitcoin mining, that now there's so much that they don't know how to handle it. And so we expect that that will continue. We're seeing that the hyperscalers are already so constrained on power in the United States in general that they're looking overseas, they're looking internationally, generally speaking, because we are essentially running out of power, and that is a hard problem. But you're seeing solutions being implemented. We're seeing people talk about nuclear generation in ways that we would have never expected 5 years ago. I do think that there are solutions. Unfortunately, there's a lot of politicalness in the way of that, and so unfortunately we have to alleviate that to solve the problem, and we can't also hamstring what we think is a revolutionary monetary technology at the same time. So
Where does Lupo stand on these issues?
they have to be very neutral, and so they don't say, right? So they're the like the arbiter of these issues within some of the case filings that AEP is trying to do. And so we don't have a sense of that yet. We will see that play out over the summer and through these hearings. But at the end of the day, PUCO is probably in the same boat, which is they're seeing the demand growth and they're knowing that we can't quite solve that. We know that we can't do sustainability initiatives, and it doesn't matter how hot you put your thermostat at the middle of the night, we're not going to solve this problem. So we'll see what they do. I don't think that they're necessarily going to be the ones to solve the problem, but we'll see if they at least don't hamstring us in the middle of that, process. So.
Do you know of any talks here in Ohio about nuclear, like installing any new nuclear facilities or not? Or?
Absolutely. So there are 2 companies that have made announcements relative to nuclear facility development, and these are specifically small modular nuclear, which are not the big systems you're typically thinking of, but small, somewhat containerized solutions. And so Oklo has already announced a project in southern Ohio, which they're already intending to pair with a behind-the-meter or on-site data center. Right, so that's one way through. And then NewScale, who has announced a partnership with Standard Power, who's developed a Bitcoin mining and traditional compute data center out in Coshocton, Ohio, has also announced intentions to put, I think, 12 of their small modular reactors in eastern Ohio, which would be at least 1 gigawatt of power. And I would expect, given the recent filings with the federal government to encourage new nuclear development, that we will start to see more of that. Unfortunately, there's a bit of an engineering solution to still be seen, and then you still have the financial burden of how expensive it is to get through the political process of regulation, et cetera, to get it done. So but the signal is there. Great. Well, thank you guys again, and really appreciate your time. Looking forward to hearing about the rest of it, but thank you.